Hi, folks, welcome back. So, last week, news broke that we are in an AI bubble, that 95% of all enterprise AI deployments are failing, and this led to a ton of doomsday headlines, a lot of hand-wringing YouTube videos, tons and tons of YouTube videos with anxious O-face thumbnails. And it was all based on this report from MIT, State of AI in Enterprises in 2025. And this report looked at what kind of AI was deployed in enterprises, what worked, what didn't work. And if you look past the headlines, there's actually a lot of insight in this report. So I want to go past all the doom and gloom and look at what's actually in this report. Of course, everyone fixated on this top level headline, which is that 95% of organizations are getting zero return on their investment into Gen AI. But the report paints a much more nuanced picture for why that is. Why are most Gen AI deployments failing? And that's what I really want to dig into. All right, so there are a few paradoxical things going on over here. First of all, adoption among employees is pretty high, and yet impact to the organizations themselves is low. And they have some interesting numbers to back this up. Interestingly enough, they call this the shadow AI economy, and the numbers are pretty stark. While only 40% of companies say they purchased some kind of official AI subscription, over 90% of the workers reported regular usage. And this was basically through their personal accounts, their personal ChatGPT accounts and the like. So people are still using it a ton. They're just doing it through unofficial channels. And so they must be doing it because they find some value, some utility in it. All right, so what about those official deployments? Why are they failing? As they say over here, only 5% of custom enterprise tools, custom AI tools reach production. And one issue over here is the format, the modality being used. As they say here, chatbots succeed because they're easy to try and flexible, but fail in critical workflows due to lack of memory and customization. So this really is the main point. This notion of integrating into workflows and having the notion of memory comes up again and again in this report as the main reasons for why AI isn't having an impact at these companies. And here's that paradox again. The employees reported positive experiences with consumer tools like ChatGPT because they were flexible, they were familiar, and yet when it came to using the custom AI tools that the enterprise bought, they had a bad experience with them. And why was that? Because these custom tools were not integrating into their custom workflows, the workflows they use to actually get work done and deliver work. And they weren't integrating into all their internal tools. This was the number one reason why pilots stalled, what they call the learning gap, tools that don't learn, that integrate poorly, that don't match workflows. And this thing comes up again and again, the lack of memory. And there's this litmus test where the difference shows up. So even though, as we saw, employees are having good positive experiences with consumer tools like ChatGPT, if you ask them the question, would you assign a given task to an AI or a junior colleague? For complex projects over multiple weeks that actually touch paying customers, only 10% said they would prefer the AI, and 90% said I would give it to a human junior colleague. Whereas for quick tasks like documents, emails, things that were not too complicated, 70% said they would give it to the AI. So you can see that in the task mix, people are still not confident in giving complex tasks to the AI. And why is that? Again, it goes back to what is the central theme, in my opinion, of this report, which is that these AI tools don't integrate into workflows and don't have memory. These two things keep coming up again and again. The dividing line, as they say over here, isn't intelligence, it's memory adaptability and learning capability. Another way to look at this is how you onboard a new employee to your company. The way you onboard them is by teaching them stuff and then having to not repeat yourself. So once you show them how something is done, hopefully if they're a smart employee, they remember that, they learn that, and you don't have to tell them that again. Whereas with AIs, they don't remember that. You have to explain a process to ChatGPT every time. The other issue is that a lot of this memory and learning that they're talking about here is tacit knowledge. Now, the authors don't dig deep enough into what exactly the subjects mean when they say memory and learning capability. But if you're familiar with the way most companies work, almost all of it is tacit knowledge, in that it's knowledge that is in people's heads. It's not written down anywhere. It's just kind of unwritten tribal knowledge in your team. So, how do you have a successful AI deployment? If you simply flip what we said so far, you get a formula for having a good AI deployment in the enterprise. Focus on narrow but high value use cases, integrate deeply into workflows, continuous learning, and avoid broad feature sets. And what all of this is pointing to is being deeply embedded in a given domain. Some of this narrative you might also have heard has been playing out recently in terms of the horizontal versus vertical AI. So, on the one hand, you have very vertical domain focused tools like, say, for accounting or legal or medicine and so on. And those kinds of vertical AI startups are having a lot of success. So domain fluency and workflow integration matter more than flashy UX. The standout performers are not building general purpose tools, but embedding themselves inside workflows. Yeah, this is kind of the vertical AI playbook. And this theme keeps coming up again and again. When they asked executives selecting Gen AI, these ideas came up again. Deep understanding of our workflow, integration with current tools, the ability to improve over time, flexibility when things change, which is kind of similar to the ability to learn. As they say over here, our process evolves every quarter, and the AI has to adapt and learn as our process changes. In terms of the infrastructure required for this kind of thing, they give a shout out to MCP, the Model Context Protocol, which by now has kind of become the de facto standard for agent interop and also just tool and data and API integrations that plug into models and AI. Now, I'm glad they talked about organizational design because this thing comes up a lot. And what they are recommending is strategic partnerships rather than doing internal builds, and having an organizational structure with decentralized authority. And this makes sense if you think about the workflow specificity that was emphasized so much throughout the report, because only as you go deeper and deeper into an org, closer to where the work is actually done by the individual contributors, will you understand the real workflow that they are using to perform the work. So it makes sense to design AIs that are as close to the people carrying out those workflows. I'll end with a little bit of self-promotion because these are themes that I have been talking about as well, some on this YouTube channel, some on my blog. I had a blog post called AI is a Mirror that talks a little bit about this. The issue being that actually a lot of enterprises don't know what these workflows are exactly. So I'm a bit surprised that this MIT report did not talk about that because that tends to be a major stumbling block. The fact that often these workflows are not articulated, they're not written down, they're simply tacit knowledge. In another piece recently, I was talking about actually expressing workflows in a way that they can get executed by LLMs. And one of the things you have to do is change your mindset about getting out of chat land and getting into workflow automation land. So, all in all, this report is actually pretty useful. It makes some really good points about how AI should be deployed in companies to make them succeed. And I've seen a lot of what they're talking about in practice. So a lot of this makes sense. It's a great report. Take a look. And I think rather than all the doomsday headlines, this actually points the way forward for how enterprises should be using and adopting AI. All right, thanks.